The world watched in silence as the South China Sea shimmered under the burning sun, calm, endless, and deceptively peaceful. Beneath that glittering surface, a dangerous game of power was unfolding. And in the middle of it all, China made one mistake, one that would come back to haunt it in ways no one expected. For years, Beijing had been building its presence across the South China Sea, turning small reefs into massive military bases, claiming islands that didn't belong to them, and daring the world to challenge their authority. But power isn't just about claiming land, it's about holding it, and that's where China miscalculated. It all began when China decided to test the limits of American patience. Their ships started shadowing U.S. Navy vessels, intercepting patrols, and warning foreign aircraft to leave Chinese territory. The message was clear. The South China Sea belonged to China. But what they didn't realize was that every move they made was being tracked, recorded, and analyzed by the United States. And when the time came, America would respond, not with words, but with precision. In May 2025, something unusual happened. Chinese radar systems detected multiple unknown contacts moving near the Paracel Islands. They weren't sure what it was, ships, submarines, or drones. Orders went out immediately to intercept. But as Chinese destroyers raced to the area, the targets vanished. Within hours, new contacts appeared again, this time on the opposite side of the region. It wasn't random. It was a demonstration. The United States Navy was showing China that no matter how many artificial islands it built, no matter how many ships it deployed, the ocean still belonged to those who could control it, not claim it. China's admirals called for a full-scale search, launching surveillance aircraft and drones. But the U.S. wasn't hiding, it was watching. Using advanced submarine networks, stealth drones, and satellite tracking, the U.S. military had created an invisible ring around China's naval operations. Every move they made, every ship they launched, every command they transmitted. And then came the turning point. China decided to do something bold, something that would change the balance of power forever. Or so they thought. They launched a massive military exercise, simulating an attack scenario near the Spratly Islands. Dozens of ships, jets, and bombers participated. It was meant to intimidate the region, a show of dominance meant to prove that China was untouchable. The world media covered it as China's show of power. But inside the Pentagon, analysts were smiling. Because for the first time in years, China had revealed its hand, its true tactics, communication frequencies, and command structure. Everything that was supposed to be secret was now recorded in real time. America didn't need to respond with force. It just needed to let China expose itself. Within hours, U.S. cyber units had intercepted encrypted Chinese communications. They learned how Chinese fleets coordinated, how radar signals switched between bases, and how their command chain reacted under simulated combat. What China thought was a display of power turned into a masterclass in self-exposure. And then came the mistake that changed everything. During the exercise, a Chinese missile frigate accidentally locked onto an American surveillance plane flying in international airspace. It was supposed to be a simulation, but the radar lock was real. The United States responded instantly. 2 F-35s scrambled from the nearby carrier group and appeared within minutes. The Chinese ship quickly disengaged, claiming it was a training error. But the damage was done. That single radar lock triggered a massive intelligence operation. Within 48 hours, U.S. submarines, drones, and electronic warfare units had flooded the region. Every move the Chinese Navy made after that was tracked with pinpoint accuracy. Beijing had accidentally invited the U.S. to play inside its own backyard. For the next 2 weeks, strange things started happening. Chinese radar systems began malfunctioning. Communication links dropped unexpectedly. Surveillance drones went offline mid-flight. Ships lost GPS contact for hours. The Chinese military suspected a cyber attack, but couldn't prove it. The truth was, they were being jammed by one of the most advanced electronic warfare operations in history. The U.S. hadn't fired a single missile, yet China's entire naval command structure was blinking in and out of control. Behind closed doors, Beijing's leadership was furious. How could this happen? How could a training exercise turn into a strategic embarrassment? They ordered their defense ministry to investigate, but no report could explain it, because what they were dealing with wasn't a visible enemy. It was silence, precision, and control. While China scrambled to regain order, the U.S. took the next step. American submarines began surfacing near international waters, close enough for satellites to notice. The message was clear: we're here, we've always been here, and we can be here anytime we want. The world saw it as routine patrols, but military experts knew this was America's counter-message. The U.S. Navy doesn't flex often, but when it does, it's surgical. Every surfacing, every photo, every routine exercise was timed to remind China who truly ruled the seas. And it worked. Within days, China quietly reduced its patrol frequency. State media coverage of its military exercises suddenly dropped. The narrative shifted from dominance to regional stability. The message was clear. China had been humbled, and it couldn't afford another mistake. But inside U.S. intelligence circles, analysts realized something deeper. China's biggest mistake wasn't the radar lock. It wasn't the overconfidence in its fleet. It was believing that intimidation equals power. In the South China Sea, America doesn't need to shout. It just needs to whisper. And that whisper travels through every sonar ping, every satellite pass, every silent submarine glide beneath the waves. China's so-called dominance had backfired. The moment they tried to show their strength, they exposed their weakness. And while the headlines disappeared after a few days, the U.S. Navy's silent watch continued. Because sometimes the strongest message is the one you never have to say out loud.
The South China Sea was still, but under that silence, tension pulsed like an invisible heartbeat. China's military had gone on high alert. Naval fleets were moving cautiously. Communication networks were encrypted tighter than ever, and the leadership in Beijing was demanding answers. Who had infiltrated their systems? How had the United States managed to disrupt their exercises without firing a single shot? In a dimly lit command room, Chinese generals stared at the digital maps covering the entire South China Sea. Every island base, every radar signal, every patrol route. Yet somehow, American submarines had appeared and vanished like ghosts, too fast, too silent, too precise. China's military pride was wounded, and humiliation was not an option. So they decided to strike back, not with missiles, but with information. The plan was simple. Launch an advanced AI-driven surveillance network capable of detecting hidden American subs and stealth drones. They called it Project Dragoneye. Massive underwater sensors were deployed across strategic points, from the Paracels to the Spratlys. Drones roamed the skies 24/7, and satellites were reprogrammed to track even the smallest ocean disturbances. The system was meant to create an impenetrable web, one that no U.S. stealth technology could bypass. But there was one problem. The system was built too fast, with too much confidence. And the Americans were watching. Thousands of miles away, inside the Pacific Command Center in Hawaii, U.S. analysts were smiling. They had already predicted every move China would make after the last humiliation. What China thought was secret, the U.S. had already simulated months earlier. And this time, Washington was ready to make a statement. Late one night, deep below the ocean's surface, a new kind of submarine glided silently through the dark. It was not like the old ones. It didn't rely on human sonar, it didn't emit any sound, and it didn't need light. This was the Navy's latest classified weapon, the Ghost Fin, an AI-controlled stealth submarine powered by quantum sensors and neural radar cloaking. It could see without being seen. Only 3 existed in the world, and one of them was heading straight toward the South China Sea. As it crossed into contested waters, the Ghost Fin activated its stealth field. Every radar ping, every sonar wave that touched it, vanished. It became invisible, not just to the eye, but to the digital world. Inside Beijing's command center, radar screens started to glitch. A faint blip appeared near the Spratly Islands, then disappeared. Another signal popped up miles away, only to fade seconds later. They thought it was an error. It wasn't. The Ghost Fin was mapping the entire region, silently recording China's defense grid, satellite frequencies, and undersea communications. Every second it stayed there, America gained the upper hand. And then, the impossible happened. One of China's newest destroyers, the Type 055 Nanchang, suddenly lost navigation for 11 minutes. Its radar spun uncontrollably, sensors went black, and internal comms froze. When systems rebooted, the ship was 20 kilometers off its intended course. It didn't know how or why. It wasn't a malfunction. The Ghost Fin had just tested its capabilities. The message was clear. If we can move your ship, we can control your fleet. That single incident sent shockwaves through China's naval command. Emergency meetings were called. Every officer was warned. They increased electronic defenses, rerouted patrols, and sent reconnaissance planes into the night sky. But no matter what they did, the American submarine remained undetected. By the next week, China's Navy was burning fuel, wasting resources, and scrambling over invisible enemies. The Americans didn't have to fight. They let China fight itself. In Washington, this operation had a name: Silent Depths. Its purpose wasn't destruction, it was exposure. The Pentagon wanted China to see just how powerless its multi-billion-dollar fleet could become in front of real stealth power. Meanwhile, American news channels began running subtle reports. U.S. Navy conducts unannounced maritime patrols in Indo-Pacific. No mention of the Ghost Fin, no mention of the incident, but the timing was deliberate. Every headline was a quiet signal to Beijing. We're already there. Inside China, panic was turning into anger. National pride demanded a show of power. So the leadership decided to stage another major naval demonstration, this time larger than ever. They gathered over 60 warships, dozens of aircraft, and declared it a defense of sovereignty exercise. But the U.S. had already planned for this moment. Days before the event, several civilian satellites belonging to international space agencies began passing directly over the South China Sea. What China didn't know was that these satellites were coordinated by an intelligence network to monitor every move in real time. When the exercise began, everything looked perfect on the surface. But within minutes, radar interference started spreading across multiple ships. Commanders couldn't communicate properly, drones started returning false readings, and targeting systems began locking on to wrong coordinates. China had no idea what was happening. Their massive military showcase was collapsing live in front of their own sensors. And then one of their destroyers fired a test missile that never launched. The countdown froze at 1. The system just stopped. Engineers were baffled. They restarted everything. Nothing worked.
Meanwhile, aboard a U.S. aircraft carrier hundreds of miles away, sailors were quietly watching the feed. The operation was working perfectly. The world wasn't meant to know, but the message was delivered. By the time China ended its exercise, the international media now noticed inconsistencies in satellite data, broken comms, and incomplete flight paths. The story couldn't be hidden anymore. For the first time, international media began questioning China's so-called invincible military technology. And that's when the real blow landed. A leaked intelligence report surfaced online, allegedly showing that American electronic warfare units had successfully penetrated China's new AI defense grid. Beijing denied it immediately, but the damage was irreversible. Confidence in their dominance shattered overnight. The South China Sea, once China's symbol of control, had turned into a battlefield of silence, a place where one mistake led to humiliation, and every flex of power only revealed weakness. From that day, Chinese patrols began to decrease. Their warships stayed closer to home, their planes flew shorter routes, and their tone in diplomatic talks softened. The U.S. never took credit. It didn't have to. Power that doesn't need acknowledgement is the strongest kind of power. Months later, inside a secret debriefing at the Pentagon, an admiral looked at the footage from the Ghost Finn's mission. The images showed crystal-clear 3D scans of every Chinese military base built over years, every radar dome, missile battery, and submarine pen. It was all there, recorded in perfect silence. The admiral smiled and said just one sentence: "They'll think twice next time." But even then, the operation wasn't over, because in the darkness beneath the Pacific, 3 more Ghost Fin submarines were already on the move, mapping, watching, waiting. The South China Sea had changed forever, not through war, but through precision, not by missiles, but by mastery. And while the world slept, the ocean carried whispers of a truth that few would ever hear: that dominance isn't declared, it's demonstrated.